So I live in the suburbs, which means every neighborhood almost practically has an HOA, right? And so HOAs, they are great, they're wonderful, and then there are times where it can be
They're not so
difficult,
great.
you know? I've seen it go both ways, and but there are also changes coming up with the HOA addendum. Is that correct?
Correct. So presently, or currently, the HOA addendum allocates fees that are charged in connection with an HOA. First thing to remember is that most buyers want this magical thing called a resale certificate, which has all this information about assessments and budget and all those things. And most contracts and the addendum are set up so that the seller pays for that and the seller delivers that. That charge is kind of separate. But what about the rest of the fees? When it's time for closing, the HOA sends sort of a bill to the title company. It says, collect this transfer fee, collect this XYZ fee. They have all these different fees. You don't know what they are. And they'll even say, collect this from the seller and this from the buyer. Well, the HOA addendum allocates those between a seller and buyer. And they basically say, buyer shall pay the first X dollars, there's a blank, and seller shall pay the remainder. So they now basically lump all the fees except for the resale certificate into one pot, and we allow the parties to freely negotiate. This is kind of a big change from what's currently there, because what's currently there is that the buyer would always pay these things called reserves or deposits for reserves, but now we just say, look, if you want the seller to pay for all the HOA fees, then you would put zero in the bank. Buyer shall pay zero and seller shall pay the remainder. If you want seller to pay for all the HOA fees, then you'd put a budget, if you want buyer to pay for all the HOA fees, then you'd put some crazy budget of $10,000 in the blank. And that way buyer would capture all of that cost. And you can allocate that cap on the buyer any way you want. So it really allows free negotiation between seller and buyer of these HOA expenses.
Which is really interesting if you are a buyer's agent trying to win an offer. That's another opportunity that may not be available right now, starting next month, that you can negotiate that part of it and win.
Set your offer apart. Put a really high cap. Say buyer will pay for $5,000 of HOA fees. Now you know they're not going to be $5,000 in Conway County.
Right.
I'm not sure about Harris County, but you put a really high budget in that thing, and that essentially means contractually buyer's going to pay for all of them. So very good point.